thanks so much. First of all, I just learned that there's karaoke after this, which is very exciting. I was a collegiate a cappella singer, pitch perfect. I actually competed in that competition. That's a real competition, so I may actually be singing later today. It's exciting. So I'm between you and dinner, but before we get there, I'm going to talk really about the now. Then I'll talk about the next. Because we've been doing this work at Cedars-Sinai for the past about 7 years, and have used virtual reality now in over 3,000 patients at Cedars-Sinai. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've learned. And in this picture, this is me with a patient who's allowed us to show her image. And at this moment, she's determining whether or not to use that virtual reality headset to manage her pain. And you can tell from the image, it's a rather old image, because that's an old Samsung Gear VR headset. That's how long we've been doing this now. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the lessons learned and the experiences and the data and how we've actually stood up an inpatient VR consult service at Cedars-Sinai and how we actually run and operate that service. Now, when most of my colleagues think about virtual reality outside of a room like this, they're thinking about gaming, entertainment. They have no idea why we'd be using virtual reality in a hospital like Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. And most people now, of course, are thinking about this. It's been about a year plus now that this announcement was made, that Facebook became Meta. And we heard about the metaverse earlier today, just in a couple talks ago. And we also heard about Ready Player One and this dystopian future that people have in their minds, that people will no longer be in real reality, but will actually be experiencing each other in virtual worlds. And that's really off-putting for a lot of people. And I think it is concerning. I think it's a concern for the future of the metaverse if we continue this narrative that we're becoming detached from one another by living in these virtual worlds. And what our hope is here is that we take some small corner of this metaverse and curate it to support human health and well-being, to really create, rather than a metaverse, a metaverse. I think my slides are not advancing. There we go. And I actually credit Daniel for coming up initially with this idea of the metaverse, where we can, again, curate some corner of this. So I want to talk about how we're doing that at Cedars-Sinai. Now, to get there, if you do a PubMed search, just in looking at the number of peer-reviewed papers that have been published on PubMed that use the term virtual reality, just last year alone, there were almost 4,000 papers that were published. And we now have, well, almost 3,000. We now have over 18,000 papers looking at various forms of virtual reality in healthcare. This is not a fringe science anymore. We have meta-analyses upon meta-analyses looking at the pain reduction benefits, the anxiety reduction benefits of various forms of virtual reality. So it's time to really move forward now. Now, we've been doing this for some time. This is a picture I often show because at this moment, this particular patient is flying over fjords in Iceland. But moments before we took this picture, he was doubled over in pain from sickle cell anemia. He had pain in his long bones, in his femur, in his chest, and he was in extreme pain. But at this moment, you can really see the emotional response on his face. And this is the first of 3 lessons I want to start off with. It's that emotions matter. And what I mean by that is if you think about the most powerful memories of your own lives, both the positive memories and regrettably the negative memories, they're almost all, if not all of them, tied to a very strong emotional experience. It's the emotion that burns that memory into your mind durably so that you remember that for the rest of your life. Instants in your life's history. So virtual reality, by virtue of the presence that it achieves, creates this impact on the limbic system, on the amygdala. We've seen functional MRI scans. I'll show you one in a second. We know that there's something about living in this world. We never evolved to live in 2 worlds at the same time. So we accept the world that we're given. Even if cognitively he knows that he is still in a hospital room, his mind believes that he's flying over fjords in Iceland. And it's an emotional experience. This is a recent photograph of me with Dr. Omer Liran, and we are using biosensors through that Omnicept HP headset to measure her pupil diameter, to measure her heart rate variability. I'll show you a video in a moment of what happens. But there are these cables in the foreground, And it's almost like she's in a metaphorical jail cell. Being in a hospital room is like being in a biopsychosocial jail cell. It is not a place of rest. It is not a place of healing. Our patients suffer physically, emotionally, socially. So the idea here is, can we give people an opportunity to escape both the physical walls, but also the metaphysical walls of their own mind, of their own immediate reality? And as I'll show you, there's an aha moment that occurs when people recognize that they do have this ability to escape those four walls. That's a powerful insight that virtual reality can deliver. This is an example of one of the many visualizations that we use. This is from Trip VR. Some people call this a cyberdelic. It's a way to go to fantastical worlds. And it's one thing if you're experiencing this in health, but it's something altogether different when you're vulnerable, when you're in a hospital room, when you're suffering. To suddenly be taken out of that environment and exploding into fantastical scenes, what it does to people's minds is awe-inspiring. And I'm going to show you a video of that in a moment. This is a study that literally is a head-to-head study of psilocybin, the magic mushroom, versus what they call the hallucination machine, a form of virtual reality where the phenomenology, the felt experience on this altered state of consciousness questionnaire is virtually identical. And so this is, in a way, like a cyberdelic. Now, this is Harmon Clark. He's allowed us to show his image, like all the patients I'm showing you here, and his name. And he, at this moment, is in outer space. Now, he comes to our hospital, unfortunately, more frequently than we would all like. And when he comes, the first thing he asks for is the virtual reality consult service. And we go, and I'll show you how it works. And he likes to go into outer space because he says when he goes into outer space and looks back on the Earth, he has this sense of awe. He says he literally feels chills in his body. He says it makes him feel a sense of empathy for himself and for the world as a whole. And it reminds them that he's part of something bigger. And he says it literally helps him fight his pain when he's in the hospital. And he's given a lecture before in our conference at Cedars-Sinai where he actually was able to wean off of opioids in part with the help of virtual reality. So this sense of awe, which can be measured with a biomarker, literally goosebumps, is something that has been studied. This is a study from Simon Fraser University up in Canada, where they took people, they then shot them over their city, Vancouver, then over the Canadian Rockies, and then they shot them straight up into outer space as they measured the goosebumps on their forearm. Look at this. Are you awed yet? How VR gives us awe and goosebumps. And this notion of awe is a measurable one. There's a whole science of awe. And the idea is that, in this study in particular, when people experience this physiologic sense of awe, they also simultaneously had a sense of empathy, a very strong sense of empathy. Not everyone has the same reaction, by the way. But this notion of awe has therapeutic value, and it's one of the mechanisms we've learned by which virtual reality works. So emotion, escape, and awe. And I now want to show you a patient where all three of these sort of came together. And to set that up, I mentioned earlier that we use a headset. This is the Omnicept, which has heart rate variability, pupillometry, eye tracking, and a few other measures. And it integrates into something called the cognitive load. And I won't go into the details of what we think that's measuring. In essence, it's sort of how hard is your brain working, we'll call it for now. Unitless measure. And this is me, just to set it up, where I'm starting to meditate in virtual reality. And then very quickly, my nervous system changes. I mean, you can see it, literally see it. And then my colleague walks in, breaks my concentration. You can see back and forth as he walks in and out of the room that my physiology is changing. So with that background, I want to show you a video, and I'm just going to set it up here. Clicker's a little bit slow. There we go. Before I hit play, what you're seeing here are two computers. And in this room, there's a few things happening. For starters, there's a reporter from the New York Times who wrote a whole article in the Sunday Times several months ago about this experience I'm about to show you. So you can read her experience, what I'm going to show you in a second. But in this room, there's also a patient who has irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. I happen to be a gastroenterologist, so I see a lot of patients with chronic abdominal pain, discomfort, and we know that there's something called the brain-gut axis. The brain and the gut are very closely tied. We could talk about that some other time. But she has not achieved relief with many different treatments. She recently lost her son in a car accident 6 months before we took this video. So I'm not showing you her, but I'm going to show you two computers in a second. On the left is her physiologic data measured by the cognitive load. On the right is what she's seeing in 2 dimensions. She likes to be on the beach, she told us. So we put her on the beach, and as she's on the beach, let's see if we can get this to run. My clicker seems to be dead up here, guys. There we go. And as she's breathing in and out slowly, you can see this mandala expanding and contracting, and there's this particle effect. Oh, thank you. And here on the left, I want to point out what's going on. When she first came in, she was in pain, she was anxious, she was upset. And you can see, as soon as we started the virtual reality, she was literally hypnotized. I mean, like a physiologic collapse. And so you can see that collapse there. And about halfway up, she started to cry. She was very upset. We said, "Are you okay?" She said, "No, I'm okay." She said, I'm in heaven with my son right now. And we said, "Do you want us to stop?" She said, "No." And towards the end, she said, I'm with God now. And we see this a lot. We have these very strong spiritual reactions. And so she took off the headset, and we said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I have no pain." And I said, "Well, what just happened to you? Like, what just happened?" She said, I don't know. It's like, "I have no pain. I feel numb." And she said, like, "I feel light. I feel like I'm in heaven. I feel light all over." And you can just imagine, the dopamine release or the whatever's going on in her head. But that was the phenomenology. And this is the moment where virtual reality matters. Because we stopped and we talked with her and we said, "What just happened?" Okay, because you don't have pain now. And the idea, this is Adam Gazzali's, famous glass brain, is that, right, we all know that the brain is not like some block of Play-Doh rattling around in our skull. It is a shape-shifting organ, like any other organ in our body. It changes in form and function. And so we explain that to her, and we say, "Listen, what just happened is sort of supernatural." And I use that word specifically. It's natural because you did it. We didn't give you a medication. We didn't inject you with something. We didn't put a needle in something. You did it. It's supernatural because it's above your normal level of consciousness. Like, you have to learn how to access this capability that you've just demonstrated to us. And the thing about this is, even if you have inherited a body that betrays you, right? A body that we try to fix with surgery. I'm a proceduralist. We give medications. You can always change the way your brain experiences that body. And this is the gift of neuroplasticity. It's almost as if evolution hacked itself by giving us this ability to change our own brains in our own lifetime, not on some evolutionary time scale. Within our own lifetime, we can massively change the way we experience our body. And literally, that's the aha moment. And we say, like, you don't have pain right now. It's probably going to come back, like today, like soon. And we're not done here, but it's going to take time. It takes about 8 weeks of work before you can start to change your brain. We know that from cognitive behavioral therapy. This is the aha moment that gives people that insight. And so we know what's happening in the brain now when we use virtual reality. This is an old study from Hunter Hoffman from the University of Washington. Look at the date. This is 2007. There's no metaverse back then. They've been doing this work a long time. Famous study on the left, patient with pain, a research participant experiencing pain. You can see the flames lighting up in the sensory cortex up top. That's the part where you say, "Ouch, it hurts." But there's also the emotional component of pain, and we all know that. Pain is psychic as much as it is physical. Buddha said there were 2 arrows of pain. The first arrow is when the archer strikes your body and it hurts. You've got an arrow sticking out of your shoulder, but the second arrow is a self-inflicted wound. When you look at that arrow and you say, "I'm going to die," right? That's the second arrow that Buddha described. And you can almost see those 2 arrows on the MRI scanner There's the sensory cortex, and then there's the center part. And on the right, when virtual reality is turned on, it's like it tamps down both of those centers. And clinically, this has been shown in multiple randomized controlled trials. On the left, from the University of Washington, patients with severe burn injuries. On the right, women at the University of Michigan going through childbirth. And in both cases, randomized VR versus no VR. On the left, the black bars are VR. On the right, the white bars are VR. And what you're seeing here is not only is the worst pain intensity, the sort of sensory experience improved, but so is the affective and cognitive experiences of pain. They all seem to be improved with virtual reality. So VR is a tool that profoundly modifies perception of the world within us and perception of the world around us. And if we can use it then to potentially recalibrate unhealthy perceptions, VR has this potential to become a radical new tool to improve quality of life. And that's sort of the idea of what the FDA now calls medical extended reality, or MXR. That's the term that the FDA now uses for this field. Now, we've been doing this for quite some time at Cedars-Sinai. We have the largest hospital in the western United States, almost 1,000 beds. And we think of our hospital as a large innovation center, a natural laboratory to do research. And if you go to one of these rooms, as I said, this is a biopsychosocial jail cell. This is what patients see all day long. And then somebody like me shows up, not smiling. You know, it's like 5 in the morning. Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this, right? Then we disappear. And then we come back again. And all day long, this is what it's like being in the hospital, right? So we've been asking ourselves for a long time, can we do better than that, right? What if we give people the opportunity just to escape those 4 walls and to go to fantastical destinations? And here, this patient is reaching out to a blue whale that's swimming across her visual field. And we started our research years ago just talking with our patients, just trying to understand qualitatively, like, what do you think of this? Is this a good idea? What do you think of the headset? How does it feel? Where do you want to go? How might you use this kind of technology? And we published a series of papers back in 2015, 16, 17. And at that time, patients were sort of initially saying, hey, if I can just go to Hawaii or go on a trip or go on a safari somewhere, that would do it for me. But now we're starting to learn that there's so much more we can do with biofeedback, with biosensors. I showed you some of those examples already. Now, I'm going to end by just talking very briefly about how we've been doing this at Cedars. This is Omer Liron. He is both a psychiatrist and a full-stack programmer developer. He creates all of our VR software at Cedars-Sinai. He's quite remarkable. And he has a mobile cart here with a system that cools the computer on the top. We have a UV light box from CleanBox. We have a bunch of other stuff. And we roll this thing around the hospital. We get consults all the time. Frequently, often the nursing staff is the frontline consultant because they see the patients in pain. And they call us, and we go up and we start to use virtual reality. I'm going to show you now 2 patients using virtual reality at Cedars-Sinai just recently. They're using Nature VR, which is a program that we created. And you'll hear the music. We've heard about music earlier. We work with Jeremy Soule, who did the music for Skyrim and Harry Potter and Star Wars and a bunch of these video games. And he does amazing music for us. So these are some patients using virtual reality at Cedars-Sinai.
That's all right. No apologies. Yeah, we see that a lot actually. Get a lot of people that get emotional. Right.
I don't even have the words to explain it. It's beautiful. It's touching that you guys are doing something that's so great. Being in here and being able to just escape what's going on. And yeah, just when I'm like, ooh, I could just sit here, especially on the lake. I'm like, shoot, I can pretend like I got some barbecue. That's all I need. And just chill there all day.
So it's compelling to see the videos, but we have to do some studies too. And this is one of the randomized controlled trials that we published several years ago. The 140 participants in the hospital randomized between two arms. One group got virtual reality. The other group had a two-dimensional TV screen. So it was actually pretty active control, health and wellness channel. We saw a much larger reduction in pain in the VR group, particularly in those with the most severe pain. Scores of 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 are the largest reductions in pain. This is another study. Now that I'm 8 seconds over for the backstage, I swore to her, I'm like, I'm going to be done in 20 minutes, I promise you. And now I'm 12 seconds over. In any event, I'll be done in a second. This is an outpatient study looking at chronic pain, chronic lower back pain. This is now an FDA-cleared program called EaseVRX, where they were randomized between sham VR or this 56-day home-based skills CBT-based program. And you can see the separation in pain scores over the course of the 56 days in favor of virtual reality. All right, and the FDA has now supported that. We're doing a number of NIH trials. This is one of them. We have 3 different NIH trials that we're doing, looking at, in this case, lower back pain. These are remote clinical trials. Anyone can sign up anywhere in the country. And this is an example of the 3 different arms in this lower back pain trial. We're doing one for GI cancer, one in rural populations, delivering virtual reality to people's homes where they don't otherwise have access to mental health care services. We're also trying to figure out what is the biological basis of what's happening. So we're working with neuroscientists, immunologists, proteomics, trying to understand what are the immune effects, the effects on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, what's going on in the body. So I'm going to end. We can talk forever about virtual reality. Hopefully this was a bit of an overview. These are many of the other opportunities in virtual reality. If VR is a therapy, then we need a VR pharmacy. And as I said, the FDA now has a name for this, medical extended reality. What we have right now is individual startup companies selling kiosk headsets. What we need is the Metas of the world to accept the fact that the business models need to include people who are using VR, not just for gaming entertainment, but also to actually help their own health. And we need to be able to download these programs onto libraries like Meta and otherwise. If you're interested in this, we have a website, virtualmedicine.org. We have a conference that we put on every year. This year it's March 30th and 31st. It's called Virtual Medicine. It's the only healthcare conference I've ever seen where people are actually scalping tickets at the door. That's an actual photograph. We have, I think, 15 tickets left, last I checked. So if you're interested, you can check that out. Finally, I wrote a book. This is the book I wrote a couple years ago, VRX, How Virtual Therapeutics Will Revolutionize Medicine. Check it out if you're interested. Since I come from Hollywood, I'm going to end with a scroll to thank all the different people that represent this work. So thank you very much. Sorry I went a little bit over, but it's time for dinner and karaoke.
I cannot more highly recommend going to his conference, and yes, it does sell out, and you should be trying to scalp a ticket. What I love most about this is the promise for some really, really global challenges. Mental health, our kids, our adults. There is no segment of the population of our communities anywhere in the world that isn't struggling. Tell me that this is closer than we're thinking, because man, do we need it.
Absolutely getting there. We're starting to see the opportunity. We've been talking to Meta. We are going to have our own software, at least on the App Lab on Meta, by the end of this calendar year, and start making it available more broadly beyond the clinical trials. So I think we're going to see more and more of
And
this.
final question, I love that you mentioned nurses because they're on the front lines. Who are the other unexpected sources that are going to help us to discover what are the problems that VR therapeutics are most needed and readily adopted?
It's easy. It's the patients themselves. We have to start by understanding their unmet needs, and that's all part of doing this work.
Okay, well then you are here to close this out and welcome everybody to rock on over for dinner.
Time for dinner, all.
Thank you so much for your participation and enthusiasm. Good night, and thank you to our online audience. We will see you again tomorrow morning.
All right.